A pink ruck? You gotta be kidding me. Is this a joke? Did you get lost on your way to a music festival, little girl? The words, dripping with the kind of practice condescension that only a career gatekeeper can perfect, echoed across the dusty assembly area. The crowd of hardened candidates, a sea of olive drab and nervous energy, rippled with snickers and hushed laughter. They were here for the Crucible, the infamous Special Operations Assessment and Selection Course, a place designed to grind aspiring legends into dust, and the woman standing before Sergeant First Class Reyes looked like she had taken a wrong turn at a department store. She stood 5'5", her frame lean and wiry, not imposing. Her face was a mask of calm neutrality, her gaze fixed on the horizon, seemingly oblivious to the public humiliation being served for her benefit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe regulation bun, but it was the rucksack at her feet that had drawn Reyes's ire. It was a standard-issue Alice pack, but its fabric was a faded, almost defiant shade of dusty rose. It was an anomaly so profound in this world of muted, functional colors that it felt like a personal insult. But when Command Sergeant Major Thorne, observing from the shaded porch of the headquarters building, saw the way she stood, not at ease, but not at attention, a perfect economy of posture he hadn't seen in 20 years, he felt a flicker of something ancient and familiar. He saw the way her hands rested, not clenched in fear or loose with indifference, but relaxed and ready, fingers slightly curled. It was a stance of profound, patient competence. The sergeant major leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing, a ghost of a memory stirring in the back of his mind. The candidates laughed, Reyes preened, and the woman in the center of it all simply knelt, her movements fluid and economical, and began a final, silent inspection of the pack that had made her a joke. If you believe that true strength is measured not by the volume of your voice, but by the depth of your silence, type quiet professional below. The first event began before the sun had a chance to assert its dominance over the Carolina sky, but the humidity was already a physical presence, a wet blanket intent on suffocating the ambitious. It was a 30-mile ruck march, the traditional welcome mat of selection, designed to weed out the physically weak and the mentally brittle. Sergeant Reyes stood at the starting line, his arms crossed over his barrel chest, a smug grin plastered on his face. "All right, ladies, and our special guest," he boomed, his eyes locking onto the pink rucksack. "The course is simple. Follow the markers. Don't fall behind. First one to quit gets a cold Powerade and a bus ticket home. Last one in buys the beer. Oh wait, some of you aren't old enough to drink, are you?" The laughter was more subdued this time, tinged with the anxiety of the impending ordeal. The horn blared, and the pack of 70 candidates surged forward, a grunting, jostling mass of determination. Specialist Eva Rostova, the woman with the pink ruck, started near the back, her pace steady, almost metronomic. She didn't sprint, she didn't jog. She moved with a relentless, ground-eating stride that seemed to consume the trail with minimal effort. Reyes fell in alongside her in his utility vehicle, kicking up dust. "You know, that thing probably weighs more than you do. There's no shame in calling it quits early. We can find a nice, safe admin job for you somewhere. Filing, maybe." She didn't respond. Her eyes were locked forward, her breathing a steady, controlled rhythm. The only sound from her was the soft crunch of her boots on the gravel path and the slight whisper of nylon straps. An hour in, the pack began to stretch. The early sprinters were now walking, their faces pale, their bravado melting away with every sweaty step. By the 10-mile mark, the first candidates had dropped, slumping to the side of the road in defeated heaps. Reyes's vehicle would stop, the medics would check them over, and their journey would end. Through it all, Rostova maintained her pace. She passed the mid-pack runners, then the front runners, her expression unchanging, her stride as consistent as a clock's tick. She wasn't just marching, she was performing a science. Her water intake was disciplined, her electrolyte shoes were consumed at precise intervals. Her footfalls were perfectly placed to minimize impact. She was a machine of endurance, and the pink ruck on her back seemed less like a burden and more like a power source, a silent, colorful testament to the folly of assumption. The other candidates, those still in the running, watched her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The joke was starting to feel very, very thin. The silence that now surrounded her was no longer one of complicit mockery, but of dawning, uncomfortable respect. The second day dawned on a field of 32 remaining candidates, their bodies aching, their minds frayed. The initial arrogance had been scoured away by the brutal reality of the march, replaced by a sullen, focused exhaustion. Today was the land navigation course, a sprawling, unforgiving expanse of pine forests, swamps, and rolling hills known affectionately as the Green Hell. Each candidate was given a map, a compass, a protractor, and a series of 10 grid coordinates. They had 8 hours. Failure to find even one point was an automatic drop from the course. Sergeant Reyes delivered the morning brief with a noticeable lack of his usual sarcastic flair. He had seen Rostova cross the finish line of the Ruck march not first, but in the top 5, looking as if she could easily turn around and do it again. She hadn't been breathing hard. She hadn't even broken a sweat until the last few miles. It was unnatural, and it bothered him. "The terrain is treacherous," he said, his voice flat. "Watch for snakes. Watch for sinkholes. More importantly, watch your clock. Hubris will get you lost faster than a bad azimuth." He looked directly at Rostova as he said it, a final, weak attempt to assert his authority. She met his gaze for a fraction of a second, her expression unreadable, before returning her attention to her map, already plotting her route with a pencil. The candidates scattered, melting into the dense tree line. Land navigation is a solitary art, a lonely conversation between a soldier, the terrain, and the unpitying mathematics of angle and distance. It is where raw physical strength yields to mental acuity, patience, and an almost intuitive understanding of the earth. Within 2 hours, the forest was filled with the quiet desperation of the lost. Young men, paragons of physical fitness, found themselves turned around, their confidence eroding with every step that took them further from their objective. They cursed their compasses, they second-guessed their pace counts, they panicked. And then, a strange phenomenon began to occur. A candidate, hopelessly disoriented and on the verge of quitting, would suddenly see a flash of faded pink through the trees. Rostova would appear, moving with the quiet grace of a phantom, check her own position, and then, with a simple, almost imperceptible nod in a certain direction, set the lost soldier back on the right path. She never spoke a word. She would just materialize, offer a silent course correction, and disappear back into the woods. She wasn't just running her own course. She was running everyone else's too. She found her first point, then her second, then her third, moving with an eerie precision. It became clear to the instructors monitoring the course via hidden cameras that she wasn't just using her map and compass. She was reading the land itself, the angle of the sun, the direction of the wind, the subtle shifts in vegetation. It was a masterclass in an ancient skill, and it was happening in front of their disbelieving eyes. By late afternoon, the course was in chaos. A sudden, torrential downpour had turned the forest floor into a quagmire, washing away landmarks and making visibility near zero. The radio net crackled with panic calls from candidates who were not just lost, but injured. One had fallen into a ravine, dislocating his shoulder. Another was showing signs of severe hypothermia. The selection had devolved from a test into a potential crisis. Sergeant Reyes was in the command tent, his face a mask of stress, coordinating recovery teams. Of the 32 who started, only a handful were still accounted for and on track. And then there was Rostova. She was the only candidate who had successfully found all 10 of her points, punching her card at the final station with over 2 hours to spare. But she didn't stop. Instead of heading to the finish line, she turned back around and re-entered the course. Reyes saw her movement on the GPS tracker and grabbed his radio. "Rostova, what the hell are you doing? Your course is complete. Get to the extraction point now." "That's an order." The reply was calm, clear, and the first full sentence anyone had heard her speak in 2 days. "Sir, there are 3 candidates unaccounted for in the western sector. Their last known position was near a flash flood zone. I'm going to get them." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Before Reyes could respond, Command Sergeant Major Thorne's voice cut through the channel, sharp and authoritative. "Let her go. Sergeant Reyes was stunned into silence. Thorne had been monitoring the entire event, his presence a heavy weight in the background. For the next hour, they watched her GPS icon move with methodical purpose through the most dangerous part of the swamp. She found the first missing candidate, then the second, then the third, who had the dislocated shoulder. She fashioned a sling from her own gear, stabilized him, and then, using techniques that seemed impossible, guided all three of them out of the rising water and toward a safe extraction point. She moved through the storm-lashed wilderness not like a student, but like a predator completely at home in the chaos. When the recovery helicopter finally landed and the last of the candidates were accounted for, only one person walked out of the forest under her own power, not shivering, not broken, but composed and resolute. It was Rostova. The pink ruck was muddy and soaked, but it was still on her back. She was the last one standing. The entire cadre, including a humbled Sergeant Reyes, stood in the pouring rain, rendered completely speechless. The sound of the rain was deafening, but the silence of their shattered assumptions was even louder. The air in the command sergeant major's office was thick with the smell of old coffee and institutional history. The walls were covered in faded photographs of decorated warriors, men with hard eyes and legendary reputations. Sergeant Reyes stood at a rigid parade rest in front of the massive oak desk, his uniform still damp, his face pale. He had been summoned the moment Rostova and the rescued candidates had been cleared by the medics. He had expected to be reprimanded, perhaps even relieved of his instructor duties for losing control of the training event. He was prepared for the shouting, the anger, the professional evisceration. But Command Sergeant Major Thorne was not shouting. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands steepled in front of him, his gaze fixed on a point just past Reyes's shoulder. The quiet was infinitely more terrifying than any tirade could have been. "Sergeant," Thorne began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "For 2 days, you have treated one of my candidates with open contempt. You have mocked her, you have belittled her, and you have made a series of profoundly ignorant assumptions based on the color of her equipment." Reyes flinched but said nothing. "You, a senior non-commissioned officer, saw a pink rucksack, and you concluded that its owner was weak, incompetent, and undeserving of a place here. Your prejudice blinded you not only to her abilities, but it very nearly cost 3 other candidates their safety. You saw a girl. When you should have seen a professional," Thorne paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. He slowly opened a plain manila folder on his desk. It was Specialist Rostova's file. He slid it across the polished wood toward Reyes. "Pick it up," he commanded. Reyes hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and took the file. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Read it," Thorne said. "Read out loud. I want to hear you say it." Reyes cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the first page. He was expecting to see the standard records of a regular army soldier. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the frantic beating of Reyes's own heart. He was holding the service record of a ghost, a legend he'd only heard about in hushed whispers in smoke-filled bars at the edge of the world. Reyes's voice was a hoarse, unsteady whisper as he began to read from the file. The words felt alien in his mouth, the concepts so far beyond his own experience that they might as well have been from another language. Name, Rostova Eva. Rank, Specialist. Pending promotion to Sergeant First Class, he stopped, his eyes wide. She was his peer in rank, but had worn the lower rank to be assessed on merit alone. He swallowed hard and continued. Primary military occupational specialty, 18X. Special Forces candidate. That was expected, but it was the next section that shattered his reality. Previous assignment. Regimental Reconnaissance Company, 75th Ranger Regiment. Reyes looked up at Thorne, his face a canvas of pure shock. The RRC was the elite of the elite within the Rangers, a unit so secretive that its members were rumored not to officially exist. They were the scalpel to the Ranger's sword, and she had been one of them. "Go on," Thorne said, his voice cold as steel. Reyes's eyes dropped back to the page. Special qualifications. Military freefall jumpmaster. Special Forces combat diver. Special Forces advanced urban combat. high-angle rope rescue specialist, covert entry and breaching specialist, Tier 1 advanced marksmanship and sniper certification. The list went on, a litany of skills so advanced and so numerous it seemed impossible for one person to possess them all. Significant awards, Reyes read, his voice now barely audible. Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart, 2 oak leaf clusters. Army Commendation Medal with Valor. He trailed off, unable to continue. The final section was what broke him. Mission classifications. All operations from 2016 to 2022 are classified top secret/SCI. Subject was a member of a specialized Joint Special Operations Command Task Force operating, and the rest of the sentence was a solid black bar of redaction. Thorne finally spoke. That pink Ruck, he said, his voice softening slightly, was a gift from her little sister, who passed away from cancer 2 years ago. It was the last thing she ever gave her. Eva carries it as a promise to always come home. The men on her team, the quietest and most dangerous men on this planet, never said a word about it, because they judge her by the content of her character and the staggering weight of her competence, not by the color of her gear. Thorne stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds. I knew her mentor, he said, almost to himself, a man named Colonel Merrick, a legend. We thought he was the last of his kind. He taught her everything he knew. He used to say that the most dangerous person in any room is the one no one notices. The one who is calm, quiet, and utterly prepared. He turned back to face Reyes. She is not here to prove she is as good as a man. She is here to prove that she is the best, period. And you, Sergeant, have been given a front row seat to a masterclass. Do not waste the lesson. Thorne walked over to Reyes, took the file from his trembling hands, and then did something that sealed the moment into legend. He walked out his office, across the assembly area where it all began, and found Specialist Rostova quietly cleaning her rifle. He came to a halt before her, and in front of all the remaining cadre and candidates, the legendary Command Sergeant Major of the Special Warfare Center and School rendered her a slow, perfect, formal salute. The story of the pink Ruck and the salute scene round the schoolhouse spread not like wildfire, but like a pressure wave, silent, powerful, and undeniable. It moved through the barracks in hushed, reverent tones. It was typed into secure chat rooms by instructors who had witnessed it, the words glowing on screens in far-flung outposts around the globe. It became an instant piece of institutional folklore, a modern myth that served as both a cautionary tale and a profound inspiration. New candidates arriving for selection would hear it from the cooks in the dining facility, from the armorers in the weapons shed, from the very instructors who were about to put them through hell. The narrative was always the same. A quiet woman, a pink rucksack, a loud-mouthed instructor, and a lesson in humility so profound it had fundamentally altered the culture of the course. The physical evidence of the legend was there for all to see. Command Sergeant Major Thorne had personally requested the rucksack for Rostova. After she was, unsurprisingly, selected as the course's distinguished honor graduate, the faded pink Ruck was professionally cleaned and mounted inside a glass display case in the main rotunda of the schoolhouse. Beneath it, a simple brass plaque was engraved with a quote from Colonel Merrick, her late mentor, which Thorne had pulled from her file. Assumptions are the mother of all failures. Competence is the only truth. The display became a mandatory stop for all new arrivals, a silent sermon in nylon and thread. Sergeant Reyes was not fired. He was not reassigned. Thorne, in his wisdom, knew that a converted skeptic is a far more powerful evangelist than a banished heretic. Instead, Reyes was ordered to write a detailed after-action report, not on the training event, but on his own failure of judgment. He spent a week locked in his office, poring over every detail of Rostova's performance, every metric, every decision she made. He read her file from cover to cover, the blacked-out sections screaming a truth louder than any written words. He was forced to confront the brittle foundation of his own professional arrogance, to deconstruct the prejudices he had mistaken for experience. It was a painful, ego-shattering process, but it was also a rebirth. The transformation of Sergeant First Class Marcus Reyes was as quiet and profound as Rostova's performance had been. He didn't offer a grand, public apology. His shame was too deep for that, and he knew that words were cheap, the very currency he had once so carelessly devalued. Instead, his apology was delivered through action, through a complete and total reformation of his professional conduct. He became the most meticulous, the most observant, and the most impartial instructor on the cadre. He stopped looking for reasons to disqualify candidates and started looking for the hidden sparks of potential, the quiet competence that he had so spectacularly failed to recognize before. His moment of reckoning came a month later, when Rostova, now Sergeant Rostova, returned to the schoolhouse as a guest instructor for a specialized module on tracking and fieldcraft. Reyes approached her after her first class, his demeanor stripped of all its former bravado. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply stood before her and said, "Sergeant, I was wrong. What you did here, it changed me. I would be honored if you would allow me to learn from you." Rostova looked at him, her gaze as steady and calm as ever. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "All right, Sergeant," she said. It was all that needed to be said. From that day on, Reyes became her most dedicated student. He attended every class she taught, taking copious notes. He asked her to review his lesson plans, to critique his teaching methods. He sought to understand not just what she did, but how she thought, the discipline, the mental fortitude, the profound calm she radiated under pressure. He learned that her silence wasn't a weakness, but a weapon. It was a tool for observation, for listening, for allowing the world to reveal its secrets without the distracting noise of ego. The legend grew. The spot where she had first been insulted by Reyes became known unofficially as Morgan Line, named after her sister, a small, unmarked tribute to the power of a promise. Cadre would point out to new students a patch of dirt that now held more significance than any monument. The story became a teaching point in leadership courses across the military, a perfect parable about the dangers of bias and the quiet strength that so often goes unseen. Years passed. The legend of Eva Rostova, the quiet professional with the pink ruck, became a foundational myth for a new generation of special operators. She never became a general, never sought the spotlight. She remained in the shadows, a master of her craft. Her name spoken only in classified briefings and in the hushed, respectful stories told by those who had been lucky enough to serve with her. Her true legacy wasn't a plaque on a wall or a collection of medals in a box. It was the change she had inspired in others. It was in the hundreds of instructors who now judge candidates by the steadiness of their hands, not the swagger in their walk. It was in the thousands of soldiers who learned to listen more and speak less, who understood that respect is earned in the silent execution of a difficult task, not in the loud proclamation of one's own abilities. The most powerful testament to her legacy was Sergeant First Class Marcus Reyes. He became the command sergeant major of the very selection course he had once lorded over. And on the first day of every new class, he would stand before the nervous, hopeful candidates, not with a speech full of threats and insults, but with a story. He would lead them into the main rotunda and stop before the glass case. "Look here," he would say, his voice thick with a reverence that was now second nature. "This is a standard issue Alice pack. It is faded, it is worn, and it is pink. And it is the single most important piece of equipment in the history of this institution." He would then tell them the story of Sergeant Rostova. He told it not as a myth, but as a personal confession, a raw and honest account of his own monumental failure. He made himself the villain of the story, the embodiment of every ignorant assumption they might hold. "I looked at this ruck, and I saw weakness," he would say, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I saw a joke. What I failed to see was the warrior carrying it. I failed to see her discipline. I failed to see her legacy. I let my eyes deceive me, and it was the most profound professional mistake of my life." He would pause, letting the weight of his admission settle over the silent candidates. "Your job here is not to be the loudest. It is not to be the strongest. It is to be the most competent. Let your actions be your voice. Let your precision be your argument. We're not looking for titans or heroes. We're looking for quiet professionals. If you remember nothing else I tell you, remember the lesson of the pink ruck. True legacy is not found in the noise of a celebrated career, but in the silent, positive echoes left in the lives of others. It is not a monument built of stone, but a standard of behavior that continues long after you are gone. Respect is not the clamor you demand in the briefing room. Respect is the silence you command on the objective. Respect is the trust your team has in your calm when the world is exploding around you. Competence is not the list of qualifications on your record. Competence is the perfect execution of your duty when you are cold and tired and no one is watching. Competence is the single, clean shot that resolves a crisis. It is the steady hand that treats a wound under fire. It is the unerring compass that leads others home from the dark. Assumptions are the enemy of truth, the rust that corrodes judgment. They build walls where there should be bridges. They create blindness where there should be clarity. The story of Eva Rostova and her pink ruck endures because it reminds us of a fundamental truth, that the measure of a person is not found in their appearance, their gender, their background, or the superficial symbols they carry. The true measure is found in their actions under pressure, in their discipline when faced with chaos, in the quiet dignity with which they carry their burdens and execute their responsibilities. Her story became a permanent part of the institution's DNA, a reminder that the most formidable weapon in any arsenal is a well-ordered mind, and that the most powerful voice is often the one that is never raised. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where professional precision defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.